If you don't get enough sleep, it can literally make you lose touch with reality. Did you know that the brain actually shrinks and cleans itself when you're sleeping?
How does sleep affect your mood? Now, if you're like me, you've been through a process where perhaps a few days in a row you've not been able to sleep properly. I tell you what, it really upsets the mind, upsets the body, and you're just not the best person to be around. So, in today's episode of the Harun Rabbani Podcast, we are joined once again by Dr. Ali Ajaz, and we are going to explore the impact of sleep and nutrition on ADHD. Welcome back, Ali.
Oh, hi, Harun. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be back.
So, what happens, Ali, when somebody is struggling to sleep? What happens to the brain?
It's such a fascinating area. This sleep science is probably one of my most favorite topics when it comes to the brain and human beings, because there's so much that's unknown. But what we do know is absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to start off with three very interesting facts about sleep and the brain. Did you know that the brain actually shrinks and cleans itself when you're sleeping? So we have a brain waste clearance system, believe it or not. It's called the glymphatic system, and it becomes very active. There's cerebrospinal fluid that flows through the brain, and it takes out, physically washing out toxins from the brain. So things like beta amyloid, which can build up and is associated with Alzheimer's. And during this process, it can shrink by about 20%. So that is absolutely
Well, let me
fascinating.
just hold you
But it
back.
happens
Let
in
me just hold. Did you just say the brain shrinks up to 20%?
It does. It shrinks in order to allow the maximum efficiency of the fluid passing through to take out all the toxins and that washing that happens. So
My mind is just totally blown because it now also explains why we don't have this taking place while you are awake. Imagine that 20% of your brain no longer working.
I think most of us struggle with our brains being 100% the way they are. Yeah, 20% will be disaster. Yeah, so that's a fascinating fact that I think most people don't know about. And also, as a human species, we're the only species known that deliberately delays sleep. Every other animal sleeps based upon instinct or their biological clock necessity. We're the only species known ever to deliberately delay sleep for work, for entertainment, for socializing, and often it's at the expense of our own health. And that's something that is really important and really central to our discussion today. And the third thing, if you don't get enough sleep, it can literally make you lose touch with reality. So when you're sleep deprived, your rational centers of the brain reduce in terms of their function, and your limbic system, which is your emotional, creative aspect of your brain, increases in activity. And people can end up becoming hallucinated, they can become delusional, paranoid, and just really lose touch with reality. And I had a fascinating case about a year ago where I had this young lady doing very well in life, no history of any mental health problems. She'd gone to America, and upon her return, the jet lag really played havoc with her, and she didn't sleep for a week. And she saw me just towards the end of that week, and she was hearing voices, seeing strange shadows. She was thinking that the government was out to get her, and she was petrified. And I picked up from the history that actually it's the sleep that was the issue. So I helped her improve her sleep routine. She had a short course of medication to help her get back into the rhythm of sleep, and she made a full recovery. So it just shows just how essential sleep is to our existence and our function in day-to-day life.
So, how does poor sleep in particular affect people with ADHD?
It's a vicious cycle. So we hear this over and over again. People with ADHD find it a lot more difficult to fall asleep, stay asleep, and feel refreshed when they wake up. Now, in turn, all of those things make ADHD symptoms worse. So over time, it's something that feeds itself and just makes it harder and harder over time. And that's, I think, a big reason why when you have younger people with ADHD, the ideas we had before where people would just grow out when they get older, but in fact, the problems just evolve and they just don't get better spontaneously. And sleep is a big driver for that.
Are there any particular habits, any behaviors that people do, people with ADHD that is, that actually makes their sleep even worse or makes falling asleep even worse?
Well, a big part of ADHD is overstimulation of their nervous system. People are physiologically and also psychologically alert. And what I see over and over again in working with people with ADHD is that they just find it difficult to turn off that inner thought, the dialogue that's there. And it's constant throughout the day, from the moment they wake up to when they try and get to sleep at night. It's just there. So they're either worried, anxious, thinking about what they did, what they could have done better in the day, what they're going to do tomorrow, what they're going to do next week, what they're going to do next year. So there's often a constant stream of thoughts, and they just can't dial it down, where people without ADHD are able to naturally relax a bit more and wind down towards the end of the day, which is much more conducive to sleep. So this is a fundamental issue, that people with ADHD have that overstimulation, that overactivity, and just that difficulty in that calm, and they don't have a button to press to try and deflate their mind and their thoughts in that way.
It doesn't help being stuck on social media, for example, right? Especially the way they've developed the algorithms.
Absolutely. So when people can't sleep and it's in the middle of the night or towards the end of the evening, there's very few things you can do. One of the easiest thing is to get up, pick up your phone and start scrolling. And the way the algorithm's designed, and the imagery and the music, and the not knowing what's next, really is eking out that dopamine. It's stealing away your dopamine. So in the moment, you're enjoying it, and it's reinforcing, and you're much more likely to keep doing it over and over again. And it's really linked to that dopamine. But also it's coupled with that boredom, what you do at night. And it's really a toxic relationship, because that, instead of making you feel sleepy and tired and preparing you for sleep, will just keep you going on and on and on, and often to the point of exhaustion. So a lot of people with ADHD tell me that they end up sleeping when they feel exhausted. And that's really not the best way to prepare for sleep. And that has a knock-on effect on the quality of sleep. Even if you're sleeping 6, 7, 8, 9 hours at night, if you don't prepare properly, you're not going to have good quality sleep.
We'll come back to some of the habits and what people can do a bit later on. What about nutrition? What kind of role does nutrition play on people's sleep?
Well, this is one of my most favorite topics when it comes to ADHD, anything related to mental health, brain health. Nutrition is central to everything. So, from Greek wisdom, we have let food be thy medicine, and it still rings so true to today. This is like a universal truth. So when people are eating well on a fundamental level, they feel better, they're healthier, and they think better. And nutrition is key, especially when it comes to ADHD, because people with ADHD tend to have problems with regulating their emotions, but also their habits. And those things really combine to lead to having foods that are really not nutritious, foods that are high in carbohydrates, foods that are going to spike blood sugar level, insulin, and play havoc with people's ability to focus and to concentrate. So it's a double whammy for people with ADHD. Not only are they not often eating nutritious food, the choices that they go for make their ADHD symptoms a lot worse.
Are there any particular dietary changes people can make to help manage the ADHD better?
There's so many, but I try and keep it simple. So the first thing, if we're looking at ADHD as a brain health issue, so it's not you, it's your brain, then before that brain can start to be more healthy and to function on a better level, you need to really cut out those things that are damaging and being toxic to the brain. I'll talk about two really big culprits. The first one is sugar. People with ADHD tend to go for sugar because it does, in the short term, increase the dopamine. So you get a spike of dopamine. But unfortunately, as high as it goes, as quick as it drops. So it's a short, sharp dopamine burst. So it's appealing in that way. But sugar plays havoc with your health. It is a big source of inflammation in the body. It disrupts your gut microbiome, so it affects the bacteria that are there that really help try and maintain harmony in your body and your brain. And it does ultimately dysregulate your dopamine function. And that's obviously a key neurotransmitter when it comes to ADHD and really what one of the driving problems that result in the symptoms. So you get a very short-term gain, but there's a big payback and fallout from sugar. And we're really talking about processed and refined sugar as being the bigger culprits. The natural sugars that have natural fiber with them, like fruits, they're much better options because you don't get such a spike in terms of the response to the brain, but also they're a lot more nutritious than what we get in the sugar with the processed foods.
It's very interesting that
Yeah.
people distinguish between what you've just said, which is having natural sugar, which comes with fruits, versus coming with, like tablespoons of sugar. So I've seen people putting a couple of teaspoons of sugar in their tea or their coffee. And my mind is blown because, from what I understand, particularly with the previous work that I've done, that our body contains 5 liters of blood, of which there's naturally available 1 teaspoon of sugar, apparently. I don't know if that's 100% the case because I've not really measured. I've got to speak to a vampire about that. But just the fact that they take a teaspoon of sugar, you've just doubled, potentially, because not all of it's going to be absorbed, doubled the content. But the other thing I wanted to add was, I don't normally add sugar to anything that I have, but I remember taking a tiny amount of raw molasses into my mouth, at the tip of a teaspoon. Oh my goodness, it was like taking a drug. I had a massive high instantly. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't expecting anything. It was like shock to my brain. So because I'm sensitive to it, it just demonstrates what an impact it has. And then final point, actually, I should have made this point earlier, which was when we take, like, say, fruits, what are your thoughts on taking natural fruits versus pure fruit juice? So basically just the liquid with no fiber.
So pure fruit juice, I think, is absolutely disaster, and it's particularly disaster for people with ADHD. If you take a glass of orange juice, naturally squeezed, freshly squeezed orange juice, this idea that we think is the really like a pinnacle of way to start your day. You have breakfast, have nice freshly squeezed orange juice. It's a complete disaster because how many oranges does it take to fill up a glass? You're probably talking about what, 10, 15, depends how big the glass is. So the amount of sugar in one glass versus eating, say, 2 oranges. I mean, most people probably manage 1 or 2 oranges. You're probably struggling between getting to 3 and 4. So not only is it with the fiber that helps regulate the sugar release, but there's a lot less sugar. So it's much better to have an orange rather than a glass of orange juice, which is really an absolute disaster.
What I found was I normally don't drink orange juice. I'd rather have the orange itself. And I think about a month ago, I had a juice, homemade, using our juicer. The amount of times I had to go to the toilet, my body just rejected it. The kidneys did not like the amount of sugar. So it definitely, and if I had that late at night, of course, that would have been broken sleep.
Just to finish off the sugar, even more seriously, and I know this is a particular area which is of particular interest to yourself, is the issue around ADHD and diabetes. So we know, and this was staggering when I looked at the research, there's been a number of papers, in particular over the last 4 or 5 years, that have looked at the risk of type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes in people with ADHD. And the study is the research and the studies are overwhelming. Really, it's really staggering. So between 35 and 65% increase of type 1 diabetes in people with ADHD, and up to 50% increase in type 2 diabetes in people with ADHD. And that is staggering. If you've got ADHD, you're much, much more likely to develop diabetes if you don't already have it. And I think there's 2 big drivers for that. We're not so sure about the science in particular, but it is suggested that the centers in the brain that are affected in ADHD are also related to glucose metabolism. So it's like a double whammy. So if you've got underdeveloped parts of your brain that we see in the prefrontal cortex, that we see in the thalamus, these areas have been associated with glucose regulation as well as focus, attention. But then also what we're talking about, habits. People with ADHD are much more impulsive, and they're much more likely to go for the non-nutritious high carb, or even just the sugar. The carbs get broken down into sugars, or just having sugar for that dopamine hit. And that will lead over time inevitably to type 2
So
diabetes.
type 1 diabetes, can you actually just clarify for those people who don't know what type 1 is? That's when you're not producing any insulin at all. Is that something that you can develop as a result of mismanagement of the sugars with someone with ADHD?
So yes, with type 1 diabetes, it directly affects the body's ability to produce insulin. Now, it's a job of insulin to get the sugar from the blood into the cells. Okay, if there's too much sugar in the blood for too long, it can affect the organs in a negative way all over your body, including your brain. So it's really important. Pancreas plays a really important part in your sugar regulation. Now, there's still a lot of unknowns around why people develop type 1 diabetes. If you've got a genetic problem that you're born with that affects how your pancreas works, that's one thing. But often the papers suggest that there's often a trigger, either a trauma or something like a viral infection that can lead to children developing type 1 diabetes. So it's fascinating, but we don't know enough at the moment, I'm afraid. But if you have someone with ADHD who just mismanages their blood sugar regulation over years, that's when you will develop type 2 diabetes. I know I always suggest with the people that I work with, and we work on our brain health treatment programs for ADHD, that they have a continuous glucose monitor that they slap on their arm, gives you 10-day readings of what your blood sugar is doing in relation to your sleep, in relation to your exercise, in relation to the foods that you eat. And I think it's essential, vital information.
So you mentioned sugar is one of the culprits, and you were going to go on to another culprit before I rudely interrupted.
That's why I'm glad you interrupted, because as you can tell, I can probably talk for days on this subject. So the other biggie is gluten. Now, people just don't like hearing that gluten is a bad guy, because gluten is there in bread, pastas, all the kind of carbs, the Moorish carbs that we like eating. People find it difficult to hear that these things aren't good for them because they taste so nice, and they've been a big part of people's diets throughout the course of their life upbringing. But gluten is a big problem, and in particular for ADHD, people who go on gluten-free diets can report significant improvements in their focus, attention, concentration, sleep. And I did a recent social media post on gluten only about a week ago, and the comments that I got from people saying, look, I stopped gluten and I noticed that my sleep was better. I was feeling less anxious. I was feeling more energetic. I could do my work more effectively. It's just staggering, comment after comment after comment. So why is gluten such a bad guy? It's a big trigger for inflammation in the body. That's the crux of it. So gluten contains a certain protein called gliadin, and that can directly cause a cascade of events that cause the gaps in the lining of your gut. That can cause bigger food molecules, toxins, bacteria that shouldn't be coming through into the body, leaking into your bloodstream. That activates your immune system, and then you get inflammation not only in your gut, so you get kind of gut symptoms, diarrhea, constipation, bloating, gas, but that inflammation also travels to the brain, and it affects the blood-brain barrier and then causes inflammation in the brain, which we know is associated with ADHD and a lack of ability to focus, concentrate, be impulsive, all the core features of ADHD. So it is really key, and it doesn't have miraculous effects on everyone. But I think if you've got ADHD, and you don't need to be celiac, you don't need to have a recognized condition where your body overreacts in a quite exaggerated way to gluten. Most people have this low-level inflammation reaction to gluten. And if you've got ADHD, it's well worth taking that out of your diet for 3 to 4 weeks and just monitoring the changes. And you can introduce it back in. And as we were saying, your body resensitizes itself to it. And then if the anxiety and the lack of focus and the poor sleep and the low energy comes back, I think that's a good sign that perhaps gluten isn't quite the thing.
Once upon a time, gluten-free food meant yucky, horrible, nasty tasting food. But I have to say, things have changed so much. It's a bit like when I went to secondary school many decades ago. It literally was many decades ago. The only thing I could eat as a Muslim was chips and beans. And that's all I had every single lunchtime. That it got boring. And the only thing I enjoyed was dessert. But when it comes to gluten-free food, like pasta, for example, you can get peas pasta, lentil pasta, and also all sorts of vegetable type pasta, and it actually tastes quite good. Surprisingly good. So it's no excuse to say, "Oh no, there's no gluten-free food." There's plenty of food. You've just got to be a bit more creative and do a bit more research on finding the right foods. Moving on, one of the big areas that concerns me is nutritional deficiencies. How does it play any kind of role in ADHD?
It plays a massive role. And this, unfortunately, in our medical model that we have, isn't really paid much attention at all. So we get doctors who get trained in medical school and then are in the NHS or in private practice over the course of their life. The training is really focused on symptoms, diagnosis, and then which drug or which surgical procedure can we find as a way to reduce those symptoms. So the allopathic medical model we have really looks at things from a surface level. I don't think I had any training on nutrition or nutrients over the course of my 5 years at medical school. I went to King's College London, very prestigious medical school. We didn't have anything. Well, nothing that I can remember, at least. Maybe half a session of something, maybe, but I just can't remember. It just played such an insignificant role in our medical training. That really impacted me over the course of my medical career, because every time I heard something about a supplement or nutrient, you just kind of dismiss it because you think, well, that's just wacky science. That's just crackery. You don't need to be a doctor to be talking about these things. This is just has no credibility. However, if you look at the science and if you look at the research, which unfortunately most doctors just do not do at all these days, they're left with the indoctrination that we've got from 50, 60, 70, 100-year-old medicine. The research is overwhelmingly clear that nutritional deficiencies are much more likely to be found in children with ADHD. And a lot of the research is done in children because up to relatively recently, people weren't interested in adults with ADHD. The research is very clear. So we're looking at nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, choline, protein deficiencies. So not only the micronutrients, but the macronutrients. All these have been associated with ADHD symptoms and worsening of ADHD symptoms. And when I looked at the research, and it was really triggered by something that came up in my YouTube feed, it was a talk by a New Zealand researcher, Julia Ruckledge, and she was talking about nutrients and nutrient therapy for mental health problems. And it just blew my mind. I've not heard anything like this before. And the results they were talking about were astonishing. I was like, okay, fine. I've got to get me that book that she's talking about. So I got her book, and within 2 days, I'd read it, and it just really, from that point onwards, changed the trajectory of how I integrate nutritional supplements and the idea of nutritional deficiencies and replenishing people and optimizing nutrients as a big form of treatment for people's mental health, including ADHD.
When it comes to nutritional deficiency, are there any specific supplements that you recommend people to consider or try out, maybe generically or very specifically to people with ADHD?
Yes, absolutely. So I think everyone with ADHD should be on a baseline supplement regime. And so that includes a high dose multivitamin. So that has all the essential minerals and vitamins that the body needs. And we say essential because the body can't make them. You have to get them from external source, so ideally from food. But as we've said, people with ADHD find it much more difficult because of the way their brain is to make positive food choices. So a high dose multivitamin. Then the next is omega-3 fatty acids, so commonly in something like cod liver oil. And the third supplement is a probiotic, and that really looks to introduce what we understand to be positive bacteria into the gut to try and counteract some of that, what we call dysbiosis, disruption in the harmony of the gut bacteria. That is pretty much there with most people with ADHD. And each of these three supplements have their own body of research that supports. Once you add one of these in, it helps improve ADHD symptoms between 30 to 50 to 70%, depending on the studies. And that's really important for me to be able to see the research and then to be able to implement that with people and then see the results. And that's the only reason why I'm able to talk to you about these things, because I see that they work and there's a strong body of evidence around these.
For anyone who's been following my channel here on the Harun Rabbani Podcast, if you've been following the shorts, I've done a handful of recipes on how to make a lot of these probiotics, for example, kimchi, sauerkraut, and I strongly recommend stuff like kefir. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm just saying about probiotics. I'm a massive fan of gut health. For when it comes to nutritional deficiency, if anyone wants to actually look into that, then go to somebody who's a nutritional deficiency expert. Go to Dr. Ali Ajaz. I know nutrition deficiency isn't your science, but it's something that you definitely guide on. If you want a direct connection to one of the experts that I know, then just DM me through one of the social media channels and I will put you in touch. It's such a big area. I've spent so much of my life trying to understand why the heck people are. I'm 55, by the way, and I look around people my age. Why is it that people my age, ethnic background, etc., why are they looking 10, 15 years older than I am? Or why am I looking younger? And genetics might play some amount of role, but I can 100% guarantee the nutrition has a massive role, the lack of exercise and so on. We'll come back to nutrition again. Let's go back to the area of sleep again. What kind of habits can people inculcate, people adopt to improve their sleep hygiene, to get a better night's sleep?
There's so much that can be done. And I guess the key thing is to find a regime that works with you and your situation. There's certain things that you might naturally find yourself gravitating towards and other things not. So it's just about finding the thing that works for you. On a basic level, the first thing is the environment. So it needs to be a quiet, dark, so like have blackout blinds or a eye mask, not face mask, an eye mask, to really have that darkness, because light does permeate through the eyelids and it does affect how much deep sleep you can get. Also, having a slightly cooler room is much better for high quality sleep. Your body temperature naturally drops by about 0.5 degree to 1 degree Celsius at night. It's a trigger for sleep. So being in a slightly cooler environment helps with that process. That drop in temperature triggers release of melatonin, which is the natural sleep hormone. So that's really helpful. It allows you to get to sleep better earlier and to sleep for longer. So the environment's really important. Now, in terms of the habits, it's really important to have a regular routine when it comes to your sleep. So aim to sleep and wake at the same time every single day. So that includes the weekends. So no such thing as a lie-in, really. Don't use any electrical devices for at least an hour, if not more, before you go to sleep. The blue light from the screens affects your brain's ability to produce melatonin, your sleep hormone. So you really don't want that. Try not to have anything caffeinated by way of drinks from, it varies for people, but 3 p.m. onwards, 2 p.m. onwards, really, you don't want to have caffeinated drinks because they can have an impact on your sleep over the course of the day. When you get up in the morning, if possible, if you can get about 20 minutes of sunlight, that's really important, because what that does is it resets your biological clock. So it allows you to be alert in the morning and much more able to relax and unwind over the course of the evening. And if you can, if you're an exerciser, which I think everyone needs to do some form of exercise every single day, if you do your exercise first thing in the morning, studies have shown that that's much more effective on the impact of your sleep than any other part of the day. Just having a routine and a consistency around that. There are other kind of tricks and hacks that you can do to try and help you unwind. And there's a whole range of things which we can go into.
Before we go into tricks and hacks, let's talk about magnesium, because a lot of people talk about the importance of magnesium. I certainly use it, but is there any one particular form of magnesium that helps improve sleep?
Yes, so you just have to be careful. There's I think 7, 8 different types of magnesium that I'm aware of. So the ones that are really looking for sleep and help calm and relax, things like magnesium glycinate, magnesium citrate, magnesium taurate. There's other forms of magnesium like magnesium oxide, which is absorbed poorly. So if you've got a supplement with oxide, it's kind of cheap and not really absorbed very well. And then you've got other types of magnesium which promote kind of bowel movement. So that's really not what you want unless you're also constipated. So I tend to stick with glycinate, citrate, or taurate.
You mentioned about getting sunlight early in the morning, and I know probably every single Brit in the UK, every single Brit in the UK, I know that every single Brit will say, "What are you talking about, sunlight? Like 6 months of the year, if not more, we don't get sun, we get cloud." So what do you say to that?
So we can try and hack that. So what I often recommend is one of these mood lamps. So you're really looking for, it's just a big light, and it's big light, but it's at a certain level. It's a level of brightness. It's 10,000 lux. That's the brightness that you want, and you want it close to your face, probably around 15 to 30 centimeters away. And 15, 20 minutes of that can, in a way, mimic sunlight as best we can living in a northern hemisphere country.
A lot of people have this idea that if there's cloud, there's no sun. Let me give you an example. I was in Switzerland, Lake Geneva. I was on a boat with a friend of mine who's very fair skinned, and we were on the boat for 20 minutes, a lot of cloud. And by the time the 20 minutes were over, this person was sunburned, as in, it's not the whole face. They weren't massively red, but they were peeling. And there was nothing wrong with them. It's just that they can't tolerate sun very much. The point is this, that even when we have cloud, there's still sunlight coming through, the ultraviolet rays, etc., all coming through. So although, and I've always emphasized this, that if you are going for this kind of sun, even if it's on a day like that, just double the amount you walk. So instead of walking for 10 minutes, walk for 20 minutes. And by the way, I've done an entire episode on sleep, but that's more related to diabetes, but it's still relevant. Sleep habits. You can look at this particular episode. If you look at the corner of the screen, click that and you'll get it there. But while we're here, and I've got a genius in the house with me, Dr. Ali Ajaz, to share with us some of the hacks that you also, other hacks you can recommend that are useful for improving sleep.
Okay, great. So each of these have their own evidence base, and as I said, that's really important for me. So evidence in terms of does help sleep and has been proven by the science. We spoke earlier about the importance of being in a cooler environment. So one thing you can do is have a shower or a bath at night, and it's it can be a relaxing experience, but the whole point of it is when you come out of the bath or the shower and you feel that cold chill, that's something that can help notch your internal temperature down a little bit, and again set that process off for you to get in a relaxed state for melatonin to be produced more. So it's a signal, it's a trigger that can really help with sleep at that time of the evening. We spoke a lot about, especially with ADHD, the overthinking and the overstimulation. So really trying to channel that by having, say, a to-do list for the things that you need to do tomorrow. So get all those things out from in here that are just bouncing off each other and down on a piece of paper. Even if you don't look at it tomorrow, which is probably a good idea too, but if we're looking at sleep, just getting it down and out from here can help with that calm. Writing a gratitude log. People with ADHD often struggle with negative cognitions, negative thoughts about themselves, negative thoughts about what other people are thinking about them, things that happen in their life. So really shifting that focus from negativity to positivity and writing a gratitude log. So that could be 3 to 5 points of something that you're grateful for in the day. And everyone has something to be grateful for in the day, no matter how difficult their life is. That's helpful to help those negative thoughts be pushed to the side and to help you get more in that state of relaxation. And each of these can be no longer than 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not supposed to be onerous. There are some gadgets that can help calm your nervous system down. That's less active in that way. So there's a couple that I have, that I've used, that I recommend. One's called the Sensate Pebble. It's a pebble-shaped gadget that sits on your chest while you lie on your bed. It's attached to, it's linked by Bluetooth to an app, and you're listening to whichever soundtrack you choose from the Sensate app. And what it does is it vibrates. It vibrates on your chest to activate your vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is one of the most important nerves that goes into the calming centers of your brain and helps you relax. So you can do that while you're lying in bed, 5, 10, 15 minutes. And also something like Heart Math, this organization that have a device called Inner Balance, and that's HRV regulation. It regulates your heart rate rhythm and your ability to relax and to calm by a series of breathing exercises. And it's all guided, but it uses biofeedback, which is really interesting. Your body reacts, and then you take that into consideration through your breathing movements. And it's over time, it can be really effective way, not only stress management, but help you relax in the evening. So there are some gadgets that can guide you through that, but also simpler things like guided meditation, apps like Calm, Headspace, 5-10 minutes. So it's not about doing any one particular thing, but it's taking your pick from the menu and having some things in place over the course of the kind of hour and a half before you want to go to bed.
Brilliant. So I'm going to put links for all those products, which I'm very familiar with. I actually have a Sensate. And when it first came out, I was one of the few people prototyping it. It's like years and years ago. And Heart Math product for heart rate variability. Again, something that I'm very familiar with, and I'll put the links to them. Great people behind these products, by the way. And the links I'm going to put on, we're not affiliates, we're not getting paid commission or anything like that. Sad to say, but there you go. It's going to be there in the link. So if someone has ADHD and they do improve their sleep hygiene, so they do everything that we covered, and they get a good night's sleep, undisturbed, at the right time, not sleeping during the day, but at night, can that improve their ADHD condition? Can it make it better?
Yes. So we know that if you don't get enough sleep, you struggle. When you get better quality sleep for long enough, so in terms of the quality, we're looking at deep sleep and REM sleep. Deep sleep helps consolidate information, lay down memories, which is really key when we're talking about ADHD. REM sleep which is when you're dreaming, that helps to balance emotions and to process emotional things that have happened over the course of the day. You only get those in the deeper sleep stages, and that's what we talk about good quality. But when your brain is able to do those things, then that has a knock-on effect. It might not be the next day. These things don't happen overnight, literally. But if it's a good habit of sleep that it builds up, the impact is cumulative over time. We're talking about weeks rather than months or years, but it may not be in a few days. So you don't get that kind of instant gratification reinforcement, but just stick with it and you will find improvements in your memory. You will find improvements in your mood and emotional regulation. You're less restless because you're more rested, and overall you're less irritable and hyperactive and need something in the morning like a coffee to pick you up.
What a beautiful segue into the very important topic close to my heart, coffee. You mentioned about coffee earlier on. I love my coffee. First thing in the morning, not first thing in the morning, usually about 10 o'clock actually. In the morning, I make my own coffee using coffee beans, using a proper Italian style cafetiere. I don't even know what they call it, coffee pot. Old school. It's strong and I'll have one. Is it bad to have coffee? Should we cut it out completely if you have ADHD? I only have one. It's a strong one. It's equivalent to 2 or 3, I guess. But I have it only in the mornings. Is it a bad thing to have coffee, or can people with ADHD still have coffee?
I don't consider caffeine to be a toxin to the brain. So something like sugar, refined sugar, absolutely it's a toxin. Something like gluten, I think it's a toxin. These things should be avoided. But I don't think caffeine comes into that category at all. So caffeine is a stimulant. It affects the nervous system and it can increase alertness, wakefulness, focus, attention. And the way it works is really interesting because it blocks a certain neurochemical receptor in the brain. So it's an adenosine receptor antagonist, which means that it stops the neurotransmitter adenosine from working in the brain. And what adenosine does is it promotes sleep and relaxation. So it just makes you feel more alert and more able to focus and to have better attention. It can also affect dopamine, noradrenaline, acetylcholine, all these other neurotransmitters that are also associated with ADHD. However, it's at a relatively weak level, so it's not uncommon for people to have multiple coffees a day in order to help them kind of work and to focus. And for a lot of people with ADHD, it's a form of self-medication. So it's a way that essentially a coping mechanism for them to get through the day if they don't have other structures in place. And this is a telltale sign when I see when I'm assessing people with ADHD and they're having 5 coffees in the morning, 5 coffees in the evening, Red Bull or other energy drinks, just to keep them getting through the day. And it's not a thing that I have a judgment on. What I can see is that it's their own way of trying to make sense and to find a way to cope. And that's admirable when your brain is struggling, and anything that you can find to help. I understand completely. However, the long-term implications of there being excess. So anything in excess becomes harmful to the brain. But if you're talking about 1 or 2 coffees a day, I think that's fine. I guess the ultimate question is why are you having that coffee? Once you build up habits in your life that are working for you, like the sleep that we mentioned, like the nutrition that we mentioned, like the exercise, there's naturally less of a need to have anything to kind of pick you up and to get your brain working, because all those other things are investments in your brain health. They help your brain improve the way it's working. It's you optimizing the level that it's working at. And when that happens, you naturally need less coffee. So for me, it's often a reflection of where someone is at in terms of their brain health. And in the short term and at relatively low levels, I think it's fine. But for some people with ADHD, though, it can cause anxiety or irritability. It can, because your nervous system is already activated and on edge, and something like coffee can push people over the edge. And I've seen that with people with ADHD. But on the converse, other people with ADHD can have coffee just before they go to sleep, and it doesn't really have much of an effect on them. It's mind-boggling. I'm not sure why there's such a stark difference, but coffee can be helpful, but not for everyone.
So in my own experience, and I can only give my own experience, is that number one, having that coffee first thing in the morning is about 10 o'clock. It's a ritual, it's a practice. I like the practice of it gives some level of structure to my day, which basically says, right, even though it's 10 o'clock in the morning, I'll get some work done. But when it comes to 10 o'clock, I've had my coffee, I'm good to go. But I am very, very strict about not having it after 12. So in the whole 12 months of the year, there might be 2 or 3 times I might have coffee in the middle of the afternoon in the entire year, but generally not. But I think what I'm hearing is also have it in moderation. And I would suggest even having it before 12 o'clock, because the half-life of caffeine is 12 hours. So half the potency is still there at midnight if you have it at 12 o'clock. Also, it's funny you say that. I've actually had, no, I don't do it anymore. As a student, I've had coffee late at night, just before going to bed, and I'll still fall asleep. That's a mystery that maybe needs to be solved one day. So is there any other question that I should have asked, or is there any other point you want to make about either sleep or nutrition that might be helpful to our viewers and our listeners?
2 final points for me. I guess we didn't talk about the obvious link between sleep and nutrition. It's really around your appetite regulation. One thing good sleep does is it regulates a whole range of hormones, including the hormones responsible for your appetite. So ghrelin and leptin. If you're having poor quality sleep, then the effect on your appetite hormones are reversed. So you get more hungry and you're less satiated when it comes to the food that you eat. So you're eating more and you feel more hungry. If your sleep is on point or better, then that does help regulate your appetite. And when we're hungry all the time and we've got busy lives, you're at work, you have your lunch break, 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there, you're going to go for what's convenient. And what's convenient often isn't always nutritious and isn't always doesn't always love you back. Rarely that's the case, I find. And I guess just to finish on, one of the things people always ask me, give me specifics. Are there specific supplements? We spoke a lot about the need for nutrition and supplements in particular. There are specific supplements that I recommend. So when we're looking at micronutrients, good quality multivitamin, I've based my choice upon the research, and I recommend only one multivitamin out there. And it's probably the most researched multivitamin formulation ever in the world. And it's made by Hardy's Nutritionals, which are an amazing company based in Canada. The research with that particular supplement is in the book called The Better Brain by Ruckledge and Kaplan. I think it's a must read. And I've been using it in my clinical practice for the best part of 4 or 5 years. And I've seen consistent results, to the point that I reached out to Hardy's and I said, look, can I supply your supplement? Because I really want it to be more accessible for the people that I work with. So I now have my own labeled version of the Hardy's multivitamin, which is called Brain Wealth, and you can get it from brainwealth.co.uk. And so that's the only one that I recommend. And if we're looking at people that are struggling with their mental health, particularly if you've got ADHD, it is a particular protocol at 4 capsules 3 times a day over 2 to 3 months. So it's a commitment, but the commitment often pays off. If we're looking at omega-3 fatty acids, cod liver oil is the easiest way. 1 tablespoon of Carlson's cod liver oil, the liquid. Get the lemon flavor because the natural flavor's a bit too fishy unless that's your bag. 1 tablespoon will give you between 3 to 4 grams of EPA and DHA, omega-3 fatty acids, and that's what the research shows helps with ADHD. And if we're going for a probiotic, we're looking at a dosage of 100 billion CFU per day. And that's been shown in the research to improve core ADHD symptoms.
Now, it's very important because this is on a podcast that everything we've discussed is for education purposes only. So if you are interested in talking to Dr. Ali Ajaz as your psychiatrist, as your ADHD expert, please get in contact. Details are below. And if you do need any nutritional advice, go to a nutritional expert. And if you need medical advice or psychiatry advice, then make sure you go to whoever is your doctor. So please keep that in mind. Do not just take everything we said for granted. Do your own research, go to your expert, and make sure you're covered, as I'm covering our facts as well on this. So thank you for that. Now, one of the big reasons I've created this podcast in the first place was to help people to become leaders in their own life and help to lead others as well, become titans in the world, make a real difference. A lot of people with ADHD are achieving great stuff. A lot more are not. But there's something about the ADHD brain which makes us super creative and great entrepreneurs and great leaders. However, if you're not looking after your health, it's an issue. So next week, one area we're going to be covering is stress management and emotional regulation for people with the ADHD brain. So thank you once again for joining us, Dr. Ali Ajaz. It's great to have you on board. Thanks for watching. Make sure you share, like, and comment as well. Ask your most difficult questions, because should you ask it, I'll be able to put it forward to Dr. Ali Ajaz. Thanks for watching the Harun Rabbani Podcast, and I will speak to you very soon. Bye for now.